The day started like any other catastrophic Tuesday. Doctor, Leora Vance found herself elbow-deep in a piece of machinery that was as agreeable as a Martian sandstorm. She muttered a colorful array of curses that would have made her grandmother's hair curl if her grandmother hadn't been blissfully ignorant of her profession. "You know, I always dreamed of working in a dark, damp hole beneath the surface of a hostile planet," Leora grumbled, her voice echoing off the metallic walls of the maintenance bay. "Living the dream, aren't we?" Her companion, a wiry man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and a permanent scowl, chuckled. "Hey, it could be worse," said Finn, who was only slightly less broken than the equipment. "We could be on Earth, where the air burns your lungs and the leaders play nuclear roulette every Wednesday." "True," Leora conceded, wiping grease from her hands onto already filthy overalls. "But at least on Earth, we had gravity that didn't make us feel like human pancakes." The dimly lit bay was cluttered with parts and tools, the sort of organized chaos that only an engineer could love. Mars had never been kind to technology. The planet seemed to take sadistic pleasure in frying circuits with its unpredictable electromagnetic fields. Or maybe it was just the universe's way of reminding humanity that they weren't welcome. "So what's the problem this time?" Finn asked, peering over her shoulder like a nosy neighbor. "Temporal anomalies," Leora sighed. "Our systems are acting like they've had one too many shots of cosmic tequila." "Temporal anomalies," Finn repeated, his eyebrows raised. "Well, that's not terrifying at all. Tell me about it." "I'm still waiting for the day we discover something that doesn't threaten to obliterate us." The colony's underground labyrinth was a marvel of engineering, if your idea of marvels included constant patchwork fixes and the constant threat of disaster. The cavernous halls buzzed with a fluorescent hum, a symphony conducted by the whirring of machinery and the occasional distant boom, an unsettling reminder that Mars had its own orchestra. Leora's team was an eclectic bunch, as ragtag as they come. There was Jamal, a giant of a man with hands so large they could crush a helmet like an eggshell. He had the demeanor of a gentle giant, though, which was fortunate for anyone who got on his bad side. "Hey, Doc," Jamal greeted Leora with a grin that was far too cheerful for someone working 30 meters below the Martian surface. "Heard you're playing with the time again." "Hardly by choice," she replied, accepting a tool from his outstretched hand. Then there was Zara, who sat cross-legged on a table, flicking through data on a holo screen. If brains were dynamite, Zara could have blown up a planet. She had a penchant for sarcasm that rivaled even Leora's. "You think the universe is trying to tell us something?" Zara asked, not looking up from her display. "Yeah," Leora replied. "It's saying get off my lawn." "But we're stubborn," Finn added. "So we're building a house, planting a garden, and setting up a hot dog stand." Zara snorted. "Great, now I'm hungry." As the team bantered, a sudden shiver ran through the floor, a vibration that made Leora's teeth clatter like a wind-up toy gone rogue. "What the hell was that?" Finn asked, his eyes wide. "I don't know," Leora said, already moving towards the control console. "But I'm pretty sure it's not good news. The anomaly was like a bad magic trick, here 1 second, gone the next, leaving only confusion and a faint smell of burnt toast in its wake. The instruments were all over the place, a kaleidoscope of nonsense that made less sense than a politician's promises." "It's like the equipment's drunk," Zara observed. "I don't suppose there's an AA for machines, only if you count my toolbox," Leora said, frowning at the readings. "These numbers are stupid," Finn suggested. "Mortally challenged," she corrected. "If I didn't know better, I'd say time itself is cracking at the seams." "Oh, splendid," Zara grinned. "Just what we need." As if keeping the lights on in this place wasn't enough of a Herculean task. The situation was as comforting as a rusty nail in a spacesuit. Something was happening beneath Mars, something that defied every rule of physics. And rules were important. They stopped space from becoming a chaotic traffic jam of planets and gravitational pull. "We need to figure this out," Leora said, her tone losing the usual edge of humor. If time's going screwy, we could end up as cosmic soup. Cosmic soup sounds disgusting, Jamal muttered, crossing his arms as he loomed like a human monolith. Finn shrugged. Can't be worse than the rations. Let's focus, Leora said, clapping her hands to get their attention. We need data, lots of it. Zara, see if you can pinpoint any patterns in these anomalies. Jamal, I need you to check the power cores for irregularities. Finn, you're with me. We're going to have a chat with the AI, see if it's developed a sense of humor. Finn rolled his eyes. Because that would solve everything. Hey, if I wanted to be logical, I would have stayed on Earth, Leora shot back, already heading for the AI core center. The AI, lovingly dubbed Prophet, was the colony's resident know-it-all, usually content to manage the mundane while the humans breathed air and ate questionable food. It hovered in a dimly lit chamber at the heart of the colony, a mass of wires and screens that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Hello, Prophet, Leora said, tapping the console. Having any existential crises today? Good day, Doctor. Vance, the AI responded, its voice smooth and thoroughly devoid of humor. I am functioning within normal parameters. Define normal, Finn quipped, leaning against the wall. Normal, conforming to a standard, usual, typical, or expected, Prophet replied. Yeah, well, the universe is redefining normal, so pay attention, Leora said, scanning through the AI logs. What's causing these temporal anomalies? Analyzing, Prophet said, taking its sweet time like an old man deciding between hats. The anomalies appear to originate from a fluctuating source beneath the colony's core. Fluctuating source, Finn echoed. As in, not stable, precisely, Prophet confirmed. The temporal flux may cause unpredictable distortions in systems and personnel. Fantastic, Leora said, rubbing her temples. We're living in a sci-fi horror film. Got any popcorn? Finn asked, grinning. Sure, if you like it vacuum-packed and tasteless, she shot back. We need to get to the source before this whole place unravels. Finn's smile faded. You know what this means, right? Yeah, Leora replied. We're going spelunking in the depths of Mars, and I didn't even bring my swimsuit. Back in the main hub, Zara and Jamal were waiting, their expressions a mix of curiosity and dread. What's the plan, Doc? Jamal asked. We dig, Leora said. The anomaly source is beneath us, and we need to find it before it turns Mars into a temporal funhouse. Sounds fun, Zara quipped, her eyes glinting with mischief. How deep are we talking? Deep enough that you'll wish you packed a lunch, Finn replied. Jamal cracked his knuckles. All right, let's get this over with. I've got a date with my pillow in 6 hours, and I'm not missing it. As they prepared for the descent into the Martian underworld, Leora couldn't shake the feeling that they were diving headfirst into a mess that even duct tape couldn't fix. But that was Mars for you, always ready with a fresh disaster like a bad plumber with a grudge. And with that they descended into the bowels of Mars, armed with little more than tools, tenacity, and the kind of stubbornness that only humans could muster. If time was broken, they'd find a way to patch it up. After all, who else was going to do it? The universe certainly wasn't volunteering. As they headed into the dim, winding tunnels, their voices echoed off the walls, a symphony of sarcasm and resolve. And in the silence that followed, the colony above seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if its stubborn occupants would come back in one piece, or if they'd be lost to the madness lurking below. The descent into the Martian underworld was like walking into a haunted house that came with its own prepackaged death wish. Finn, Leora, Jamal, and Zara trudged through the tunnels, their headlamps casting wobbly circles of light that did little to dispel the suffocating gloom. The air was thick with the scent of rust and stale regret, and the walls seemed to close in, as if Mars itself was considering a hostile takeover of their personal space. Feels like walking into a bad dream, Jamal grumbled, his voice echoing ominously. Tell me about it, Finn replied, dodging a low-hanging pipe. I keep waiting for some Martian ghost to jump out and say boo. That's if we're lucky, Leora said, her eyes scanning the path ahead. More likely, it'll be a time-displaced version of ourselves, here to give us a stern lecture about poor life choices. Wouldn't be the first time, Zara quipped, her fingers dancing across her portable console. I've made a career out of bad decisions. Working on Mars is just the latest in a series of questionable moves. Hey, let's not forget, Finn said, gesturing to the darkness. We're the pioneers, the brave souls who said, sure, let's move to a dead planet and see what happens. Yeah, Leora snorted, because Earth was just so last century. The tunnel sloped ever downward, twisting like a drunk snake. It seemed to go on forever, an endless loop of monotony occasionally interrupted by Finn's grumbling or Zara's sarcastic commentary about the state of Martian architecture. After what felt like an eternity, the team arrived at a chamber that was decidedly less charming than the rest of the tunnels, which was saying something. The air felt charged, like the moment right before a lightning strike, and Leora's skin prickled with a sensation that was neither pleasant nor reassuring. Well, this is cozy, Jamal said, looking around. All we need is a welcome mat and some throw pillows. Welcome to the unnerving heart of Mars, Leora muttered, shining her light around the cavernous space. Let's see what's causing all the fuss. In the center of the chamber stood a structure that looked like it had been designed by a committee of mad scientists and abstract artists. It was a mass of gears, glowing panels and circuitry that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The air around it shimmered, distorting like heat waves on a summer day, which was ironic, considering they were several meters below the cold, unforgiving surface of Mars. Looks ancient, Zara observed, stepping closer. And not in a charming, archaeological way. More in a this could kill us all kind of way. Right, Leora said, eyeing the device suspiciously. Let's not touch anything until we know what it does. Agreed, Finn said, though his fingers twitched like a child told not to press the big, red button. The team circled the device, scanning and recording data with a mix of fascination and trepidation. Whatever this thing was, it was the source of their troubles, a relic from a civilization long gone, activated by the presence of humanity's meddling. So what's the verdict? Jamal asked, his breath fogging in the dim light. Near as I can tell, Leora began, this thing is some sort of temporal engine. It's been sitting here dormant until we, like the idiots we are, stumbled across it and woke it up. Great, Finn said, rubbing his hands together. We've pissed off Mars. What's next? Eviction notice from the universe. Maybe, Zara said, tapping her console. The energy readings are off the charts. If we don't shut this thing down, it could tear a hole in space-time big enough to swallow the colony. Just what I always wanted, Leora said, grimacing. To be remembered as the engineer who turned her entire colony into a black hole. Hey, at least we'd go down in history, Finn replied with a smirk. Or wormhole or whatever. Here's the thing, Zara said, ignoring Finn's attempt at humor. The device seems to be in a feedback loop. It's drawing power from the colonist systems and amplifying it, but not in a way we can control. So basically, it's a ticking time bomb, Jamal said, crossing his arms. Yep, Leora said, and we're the ones who have to defuse it. I don't suppose any of you have experience with ancient Martian technology. Sorry, Finn said. My degree's in contemporary Martian coffee brewing. Then we'll have to improvise, Leora said, studying the device's interface. Zara, can you isolate the primary power conduit? Already on it, Zara replied, her fingers a blur over the console. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the needle's on fire. Jamal, Leora continued, we're going to need you to reroute the power. If we can cut the flow, the device might shut down. Jamal nodded, already moving toward the conduit panels. No pressure, right? Just the fate of the colony. Exactly, Leora said. Just keep telling yourself that. As Jamal worked his magic with the power systems, Leora and Zara examined the device, hoping to find some failsafe or emergency shutdown. The air crackled with tension, every ticking second a reminder that they were on borrowed time and possibly borrowed laws of physics. Finn hovered nearby, his usual jokester demeanor replaced with a rare moment of focus. So, what happens if we can't shut this thing off? Then we get to find out what it's like to be a soup can in a blender, Leora replied, not looking up from her work. Sounds cozy, Finn said. I'll bring the Croutons. Minutes stretched into an eternity as they worked, the hum of the device a constant reminder of their impending doom. Leora's mind raced, trying to make sense of the alien technology. Every wire, every panel seemed designed to thwart her attempts at understanding, as if the device itself was mocking her. Finally, Zara let out a triumphant noise. Got it. I've isolated the main conduit. Jamal, you ready? Jamal gave a thumbs up, his hands poised over the controls. Ready as I'll ever be. Let's hope this works. On my mark, Leora said, her heart pounding. 3, 2, 1. Now, with a flick of switches and a surge of determination, the team severed the power flow. The device shuddered, lights dimming as the energy was cut off. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the sound of their own breathing. Then, with a groan that sounded suspiciously like a death rattle, the device powered down, its lights flickering out one by one. For a moment, none of them moved, half expecting some catastrophic backlash. But the air remained still, the ominous hum gone. Did we do it? Finn asked, breaking the silence. Looks like, Leora said, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. For now, anyway. So we live to screw up another day, Zara said, relief evident in her voice. Here's hoping we don't have to, Jamal replied, wiping sweat from his brow. Next time I vote for a peaceful mission. Something involving a beach and a cocktail. Seconded, Finn said, grinning. Mars can keep its mystery devices. With the immediate threat neutralized, the team made their way back to the surface, the oppressive weight of potential disaster lifted from their shoulders, at least for the time being. The tunnel felt less foreboding now, more a testament to their stubbornness and ingenuity than a harbinger of doom. As they emerged into the dim light of the maintenance bay, Leora couldn't help but smile. They'd faced down the unknown and come out the other side in one piece, no less. Well, that was fun, Leora said, removing her helmet. Who's up for a victory drink? Finn clapped his hands together. I'll take anything that doesn't taste like recycled shoe leather. As they headed toward the mess hall, Leora felt a sense of camaraderie with her team. They'd faced the darkness together and lived to tell the tale, a ragtag group of misfits in a place that seemed determined to test their limits. We should probably report this, Zara said, her tone betraying more amusement than concern. Promise me you'll leave out the part about cosmic soup, Leora replied, her voice light. Deal, Zara said with a laugh. We wouldn't want to scare off the next batch of volunteers. Yeah, Jamal said. We've got to leave some surprises for them. As the laughter echoed through the corridors, Leora couldn't help but think that, despite everything, Mars wasn't such a bad place after all. Sure, it had its challenges, the kind that could turn your hair gray in no time, but it also had its moments of triumph. And that was something worth sticking around for, even if it meant dealing with ancient Martian devices and the occasional bout of cosmic insanity. The maintenance bay's comforting scent of burnt metal and stale coffee was a welcome change from the suffocating gloom of the tunnels. The machinery around them hummed like an overworked office drone, a constant reminder that even on Mars you couldn't escape the grind. So, what now? Finn asked, slouching against a console. Do we just sit here and wait for Mars to throw another cosmic tantrum? Pretty much, Leora replied, tapping a finger on her chin. Unless anyone has a better idea than relying on the whims of an alien device with a god complex. I could try kicking it, Finn suggested with a grin. Worked on my last relationship. Maybe we should stick to science, Zara said, her fingers flying over her console like a concert pianist on a caffeine high. Or at least something that sounds like it. Speaking of science, Jamal chimed in. Any chance we can, science the hell out of this. Stabilize the anomalies with something a bit more conventional than blind luck and half-baked theories. Conventional science, Leora laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. Mars chews up conventional science and spits it out like weak-old gum. But hey, it's worth a shot. The team busied themselves with data analysis, trying to make sense of the readings they'd gathered. It was a bit like solving a jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces were the same shade of you're screwed. Okay, so, Zara said after a while, her eyes glued to her screen. I've cross-referenced the energy signatures with every known type of temporal anomaly in the database. We've got nothing. Nada. Zip, fantastic, Finn said, rubbing his temples. So we're dealing with something so advanced it might as well be magic. I love it when science fails me. Maybe we should just call it a day, go home, and hope it all magically resolves itself, Jamal suggested. Not like anything's gone wrong before, right? We're not giving up that easily, Leora said with determination. It's not like there's anywhere else to go. Earth is a no-go zone, and I doubt any of us have enough frequent flyer miles for a one-way trip to Venus. As they worked, the Martian electromagnetic fields continued their cosmic ballet, throwing strange shadows across the room like a bad noir film. The anomaly was still active, its keystone device nestled in the underground chamber, mocking their every attempt to understand its function. Suddenly, the lights flickered ominously and the room seemed to tilt for a fraction of a second. Time itself felt like it skipped a beat, leaving the team momentarily weightless. Did anyone else feel that? Finn asked, his voice tinged with nervous laughter. Yeah, Zara replied, her console showing a spike in the anomaly's energy levels. It's like reality's having an existential crisis. The anomalies are getting worse, Leora said, her face grim. We're running out of time, so what's the plan? Jamal asked. Do we just stand here and look pretty while Mars rearranges its own furniture? Pretty won't save us, Leora said, rubbing her eyes. We need to think outside the box, way outside. Like the box is a dot to them kind of outside. The team continued to brainstorm, throwing around ideas like darts in a pub full of bad aim. Conventional science was proving less than useless, like trying to swat a fly with a spoon. Maybe the solution isn't in the books, Leora mused aloud, frustration giving way to a stubborn spark of intuition. Maybe we need to go rogue, think like the mad scientists who built this thing in the first place. Rogue science, Finn asked with a smirk. Now you're speaking my language. Exactly, Leora said, warming to the idea. We need to treat this like a problem that doesn't want to be solved. Reverse engineer it, outsmart it. Or at least confuse it into submission, Zara added with a grin. Why not? Jamal shrugged. We've got nothing to lose but our last shred of sanity. Their unconventional approach started with a deep dive into the device's control systems, or what passed for them. It was a chaotic mess of circuits and glowing panels that made less sense the more you looked at it. A bit like modern art, if modern art had the power to unmake reality. Okay, Leora said, pointing to a series of holographic projections floating above the console. If we can isolate the feedback loop, we might be able to stabilize the energy output long enough to figure out what the hell it's doing. And if that doesn't work, Jamal asked, then we try something riskier, Leora said, her voice steady. My gut's telling me there's more to this than meets the eye. Guts are great and all, Finn said, but I'd prefer to use my brain. It's where I keep my skepticism. Some things can't be rationalized, Leora replied, exasperation creeping into her tone. Not everything in the universe likes to play by the rules. With their new plan in place, the team dove back into their work, every keystroke and command a gamble against the ticking clock of cosmic doom. As they worked, another ripple in reality passed through the room, leaving behind a sensation like the aftermath of a bad dream. The air crackled with unseen tension, making the hair on the back of Leora's neck stand on end. All right, Zara said, her voice a mix of resolve and apprehension. Time to see if crazy beats impossible. They initiated the new protocol, redirecting the energy flow in an attempt to stabilize the device without shutting it down completely. It was a delicate balance, like trying to defuse a bomb while blindfolded and standing on one foot. Hold your breath, people, Finn said, as the device began to react. The anomaly's energy surged, its glow intensifying as the team fought to control it. The chamber's oppressive air seemed to pulse in time with their racing hearts. Come on, Leora muttered, her fingers flying over the controls. Just a little more. Then, with a jarring lurch, the anomaly shifted, its energy stabilizing for a moment before the entire room was bathed in a brilliant flash of light. When the spots cleared from their vision, the team found themselves staring at a holographic projection that hadn't been there before. It was a map of Mars, or at least some version of it, with strange symbols and coordinates highlighted across the surface. "What the hell is that?" Finn asked, blinking at the display. "Looks like a treasure map," Zara said with a bemused expression. "X marks the spot and all that. But what's it for?" Jamal asked, leaning in for a closer look. "Maybe it's the key to shutting this thing down for good," Leora said, her voice filled with newfound determination. "Or maybe it's a last-minute plot twist. Either way," Finn said, "we're not leaving here without some answers." As they studied the map, the room seemed to settle into an uneasy calm, the anomaly's energy subsiding enough to give them a moment's respite. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless, and it gave them the breathing room they needed to plan their next move. "All right," Leora said, her mind racing with possibilities. "We've got a lead. Let's follow it before Mars decides to change the rules again." With their path laid out before them, the team prepared to venture deeper into Mars' mysteries, driven by equal parts curiosity and desperation. Whatever secrets the map held, they were determined to uncover them, if only to prove that humanity wasn't entirely out of its depth on this desolate, hostile planet. As they gathered their gear, Leora allowed herself a small smile, the kind that comes with the knowledge that you've just turned the tables on fate. "Let's go find our treasure," she said, her voice filled with the kind of reckless hope that only a human could muster. Finn rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his own grin, and hopefully not unleash another cosmic nightmare in the process. "One disaster at a time," Zara said, securing her console. "Let's save the universe first, then worry about the rest." With renewed purpose, the team set off once more into the Martian underworld, their footsteps echoing through the tunnels like ghosts in a machine. They moved with the kind of grim determination that comes from knowing the odds are stacked against you and choosing to defy them anyway. As they descended into the unknown, Leora couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something monumental, something that could change everything they thought they knew about Mars and its buried past. In the back of her mind, a small voice whispered a warning, a reminder of the price that often came with such discoveries. But she silenced it in favor of a louder, more compelling thought, the belief that no matter how far humanity wandered from its home, it would always find a way to turn the tables on the universe, even if it sometimes required a little madness to do so. As they pressed on, the path ahead seemed to beckon them forward, a tantalizing glimpse of the unknown waiting just beyond the next bend. And for the first time in a long time, Leora felt a sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could outsmart the unwritten rules of the cosmos, or, at the very least, give them a run for their money. The maintenance bay was a cacophony of malfunctioning technology and human desperation, not unlike a jazz quartet where everyone was playing a different song. The air was thick with the scent of burnt metal and stale coffee, the unofficial perfume of engineers everywhere. Leora Vance, self-proclaimed savior of the Martian colony's machinery, stood with her hands on her hips, staring at the console as if it had insulted her mother. Finn slouched nearby, a permanent fixture against a console, suggesting they kick the device like it owed them money. "You think if we just stare at it long enough it'll fix itself?" he asked, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Not unless it's scared of being outstared by a human," Leora replied dryly. "But good luck with that strategy. Hey, maybe it responds better to aggressive indifference." Finn shrugged, tapping the console with his boot. "Sometimes you gotta show these machines who's boss." Jamal, ever the advocate for science over shenanigans, shook his head. "I'm all for non-violence, man." "Maybe we should try stabilizing the anomalies with actual science." "Oh, sure," Finn shot back. And while we're at it, let's invent a perpetual motion machine and cure hiccups instantly. Leora sighed, her fingers tapping against her chin. Look, the anomalies are starting to affect the life support systems. If we don't come up with something soon, we might not have to worry about breathing Mars' hostile air because we'll be part of it. Zara was at her console, fingers dancing across the keys like a concert pianist at their final performance. I'm pulling up the readings. These fluctuations are like a toddler on a sugar high, bouncing all over the place. So, what's your big plan, Leora? Jamal asked, leaning in with the earnestness of someone who hadn't yet been ground to a fine paste by Martian cynicism. Oh, Leora said, rolling her eyes. Create a paradox so big it thinks twice about messing with us. No big deal, Finn raised an eyebrow. You're talking about manipulating anomalies by creating a controlled paradox. That's the kind of mad science that gets a planet blown up in bad sci-fi flicks. Yeah, well, we're all stars in our own disaster movies, Leora replied. Might as well make it interesting. The truth was, the idea was as absurd as it was brilliant. The controlled paradox was a theoretical concept at best. The kind of thing you tossed around as a joke at university parties just to see who would snort their drink through their nose. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and right now, things were looking pretty damn desperate. We have to execute it carefully, Leora continued. If we miscalculate anything, we could destabilize everything. Jamal, ever the voice of reason, tilted his head. And if we don't do anything, the colony could suffocate. Perfect. Two equally terrifying options. Zara glanced up from her console, twirling a stylus like a drumstick. Just another day on Mars, then. I'm in. The chamber where they'd been working now felt like the eye of a storm, deceptively calm on the surface but ready to tear everything apart with one wrong move. It was an unsettling feeling, knowing they were trying to outsmart the very universe they lived in. All right, let's get to work, Leora said, injecting more confidence into her voice than she felt. Jamal, keep monitoring the life support systems. Any hiccup, we need to know immediately. Jamal saluted half-heartedly, more in jest than sincerity. Roger that. I'll be the canary in this coal mine. As they started on the Paradox project, the room seemed to close in around them. Mars had a way of making you feel like you were one step away from being swallowed whole, a hostile host with a bad attitude. The walls of the Martian underworld weren't doing them any favors either, the charged air making each breath feel like swallowing a rusty nail. So how do we even start with this paradox thing? Finn asked, staring at the console as if it would sprout lips and give him the answer. We set up a feedback loop within the anomaly, Leora explained, something to confuse its parameters. Kind of like how you trick a cat with a laser pointer, but on a cosmic scale. Right, because that sounds perfectly sane, Finn said, sarcasm dripping from his words like honey laced with arsenic. Maybe we can use string theory next to play fetch. Zara bit her lip, suppressing a laugh. Hey, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if we needed Schrödinger's cat to fix this mess. It's both dead and alive, so why not both broken and fixed? The work was grueling, requiring the kind of precision normally reserved for neurosurgeons. Except they weren't dealing with brains, but the very fabric of reality, and the tools they had were about as reliable as a GPS on a road trip through the Bermuda Triangle. As Leora adjusted the energy conduits, the lights flickered again, casting long shadows that twisted and morphed across the walls like fevered dreams. Is it doing that thing again? Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might tip the balance against them. Yeah, Leora replied, focusing on the task at hand. Means we're close. Jamal's console beeped loudly, a chorus of angry alarms indicating the life support systems were feeling the strain. Guys, we're looking at a 50% drop in efficiency here. I'm not saying we're screwed, but if this were a poker game, I'd be folding right about now. Just hold on, Leora said, her voice steady but her heart racing. We've got this. The room felt alive with tension, every sound amplified by the oppressive silence that followed. It was a waiting game and patience was running thin. "All right, moment of truth," Leora said, taking a deep breath. "Everyone ready, ready as we'll ever be," Finn replied, his grin a mix of excitement and sheer terror. "Let's either make history or become a cautionary tale." The final adjustments in place, Leora initiated the paradox sequence. The room thrummed with energy, a symphony of chaos and order playing out before their eyes. It was like trying to hold onto a live wire while standing in a puddle, the kind of thrill you didn't want but couldn't ignore. As the anomaly reacted to their manipulation, the energy surged, but instead of spiraling out of control, it began to stabilize. Slowly, cautiously, like a wild animal deciding not to eat you after all. "It's working," Zara said, disbelief heavy in her voice. "It's actually working. Just because it's working doesn't mean it won't still bite us in the ass," Finn cautioned. "True, but I'll take progress over doom any day," Leora said, allowing herself a small smile of triumph. Jamal was still monitoring the life support systems, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Efficiency is climbing back up. We might just pull this off." The team watched as the anomaly stabilized further, its energy no longer threatening to burst out of control. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless, and right now that was more than they dared to hope for. "Okay, so what now?" Finn asked, looking at Leora expectantly. "We keep pushing," she replied. "We're onto something here, and I'm not stopping until we've got answers." They continued to monitor the systems, adjusting and readjusting as needed, their focus unwavering despite the odds stacked against them. It was a delicate dance, each step potentially their last if they miscalculated even a fraction. "Feels like we're playing chess with a black hole," Zara muttered, her eyes glued to her console. "Yeah, well, let's hope it doesn't decide to swallow the board," Leora replied, her hands never stopping their work. As time passed, the anomalies continued to stabilize under their watchful eyes, the room slowly shedding its oppressive weight. It was as if the Martian underworld was loosening its grip, if only for a moment. "We're not out of the woods yet, but this is a good start," Jamal said, relief coloring his voice. "And here I thought Mars was just one big, angry sandbox," Finn quipped. "Angry, sure. But at least we've got a shovel," Leora said, her resolve hardening. "Let's dig ourselves out of this mess." Together they forged ahead, driven by the promise of answers and the determination to survive. It was a race against time and the universe itself, but they were ready to face whatever came next, armed with nothing but their wits and a healthy dose of sarcasm, because sometimes that's all you had, and sometimes that was enough. The lights in the maintenance bay flickered, casting shadows that twisted and contorted on the walls like a haunted house's attempt at interpretive dance. It was almost enough to make you think Mars was trying to host its own horror show. Leora couldn't help but roll her eyes as she tightened a bolt that refused to cooperate. Mars was a stubborn bastard, and it seemed its technology had taken after its parent planet. Would it kill the universe to give us a break, or at least a manual that isn't written in cosmic gibberish? Leora muttered, her voice echoing slightly in the cramped space. Finn, leaning against a console that looked like it had seen better days, or possibly worse, depending on your perspective, snorted. "I think the universe gets off on watching us squirm. It's got front row seats to the greatest disaster flick of all time. Must be nice to be the universe," Zara chimed in, not looking up from her console where she was attempting to decipher the latest batch of data. "It gets to be the sadistic director, and we're the hapless actors running from invisible monsters. Or the invisible monsters are running from us," Finn suggested, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "I mean, have you seen us lately?" "True," Leora conceded, stepping back to survey her handiwork. The machinery looked slightly less like it was plotting their demise, but that was a low bar to clear these days. "Still, I'd rather not piss off whatever cosmic powers might be listening." "Too late," Jamal said, joining them with a wry grin. "We already kicked the hornet's nest." Now we're just trying not to get stung to death." The words hung in the air like a smoke alarm's warning tone, and Leora felt the weight of their predicament settle over her like a particularly clingy blanket. It was the kind of situation that made you wish you hadn't bothered getting up in the morning, but there were no sick days for the apocalypse. "All right, let's go over this one more time," Leora said, drawing herself up in an attempt to project authority. "We're going to stabilize the anomalies with the paradox. It's risky, but it's all we've got." "Risky?" Zara echoed, eyebrows raised. "That's like calling the sun a bit warm. This is straight-up lunacy." "Which makes it par for the course," Finn said, pushing off the console and joining the others. "If we weren't half insane, we wouldn't be here." Jamal nodded, his expression sobering. "The life support systems are still on a knife edge. We need to make this work." The group fell silent, the gravity of their situation settling over them like a shroud. Leora felt a flicker of doubt, a chill creeping down her spine despite the oppressive heat of the bay. She hated second-guessing herself, but the stakes were higher than a Martian dust storm. "Let's do this," she said finally, injecting as much bravado into her voice as she could muster. "If we fail, we'll at least go out with a bang, not a whimper. Just make sure it's not the kind of bang that leaves us as interstellar dust," Finn quipped, though his eyes were serious. They moved as one, a motley crew of misfits united by desperation and the faintest glimmer of hope. Leora couldn't help but marvel at the fact that these were the people she was trusting with her life, and vice versa. It was enough to make you believe in something bigger than yourself, if only for a heartbeat. As they worked, the atmosphere in the bay grew more charged, the tension sparking between them like static electricity. It was a dangerous dance, one wrong step enough to send them tumbling into oblivion, but they couldn't afford to falter. The machinery whirred to life under Leora's hands, the familiar hum a comforting reminder that they still had a fighting chance. The console's screens flickered with data streams, numbers and graphs that painted a picture of chaos barely contained. "How's it looking?" Leora asked, glancing over at Zara, who was typing furiously. "Like a toddler trying to build a block tower in a hurricane," Zara replied, her tone dry as the Martian dust. "But I think it's holding." Jamal was monitoring the life support systems, his face a study in concentration. "Efficiency's still low, but it's not dropping any further. We might just scrape by." "Scraping by is the story of my life," Finn said, his tone light but his expression grim. "Let's just hope the universe doesn't toss us another curveball." Even as the words left his mouth, the lights flickered again, threatening to plunge them into darkness. It was a reminder of how close they were to the edge, teetering on the brink of disaster with nothing but determination and duct tape holding them together. "Don't jinx it," Leora warned, though she couldn't deny the flash of fear that lanced through her. They were walking a tightrope, and there was no net to catch them if they fell. Each passing minute felt like an eternity, every second dragging out into infinity as they worked against the clock. Sweat trickled down Leora's brow, her muscles aching from tension and overuse, but she couldn't afford to stop. The console beeped, a cheerful sound that seemed incongruous in the midst of their struggle. Leora glanced at it, heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat of doom. "It's stabilizing," Zara said, disbelief coloring her voice. "I can't believe it, but it's actually working." "Don't sound so shocked," Finn said, though the relief in his voice was palpable. "We were due for a win. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. Or maybe we're just too stubborn to die," Jamal added, his smile a welcome sight in the gloom. "We've got this." Leora allowed herself a small smile, though it felt foreign on her face. They weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. "Keep monitoring the systems," she instructed, her voice steady. "We can't afford any more surprises." The team nodded, each of them returning to their tasks with renewed vigor. There was still a long way to go, but they'd taken the first step, and sometimes that was the hardest part. Minutes ticked by, each one an eternity of tension and uncertainty. Leora focused on the task at hand, her mind a whirl of equations and possibilities as she worked to keep the system stable. "Any more bright ideas?" Finn asked, breaking the silence. "Preferably ones that don't involve us getting vaporized." "None that won't get us killed," Leora replied dryly. "But I'm open to suggestions." Zara chuckled, though there was a hint of hysteria in her laugh. "At this point I'd settle for a miracle or a stiff drink." "I think we're fresh out of both," Jamal said, his tone wry. "But if we make it through this, first round's on me." It was a small promise, but one that buoyed their spirits as they continued their work. They might not have much, but they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. The console beeped again, this time with a note of urgency that set Leora's nerves on edge. She glanced at it, her heart sinking at the sight of the readings. "The anomalies are fluctuating again," Zara said, her voice tight. "We need to stabilize them now." "On it," Leora said, her fingers flying over the controls as she adjusted the settings. It was a delicate balance, one misstep enough to send everything spiraling out of control, but she couldn't afford to hesitate. The room was silent, the only sound the hum of the machinery and the rapid tapping of keys as they worked to maintain their fragile hold on stability. It was a race against time, each second another reminder of how close they were to disaster. "Come on," Leora muttered under her breath, willing the universe to give them a break. "Just hold together." The minutes stretched on, the tension in the air almost palpable as they fought to keep the anomalies in check. It was a delicate dance, one that required precision and focus, but they couldn't afford to falter. Finally, the console beeped again, a soft chime that seemed almost anticlimactic after the chaos of the past few hours. Leora glanced at it, her heart skipping a beat at the sight of the readings. "It's working," Zara said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. "I can't believe it, but it's actually working." The team let out a collective breath, the tension in the room easing as they took in the news. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless, and right now that was more than they could have hoped for. "Let's not start celebrating just yet," Leora cautioned, though she couldn't keep the smile from her face. "We've still got a long way to go." "But we're getting there," Jamal said, his expression reflecting the hope that had eluded them for so long. "And that's more than we could have asked for." They continued their work, the atmosphere in the bay shifting from one of desperation to determination. They might be battered and bruised, but they weren't beaten, not by a long shot. "Looks like the universe decided to cut us some slack," Finn said, though his tone was more hopeful than sarcastic. "Maybe it's not such a sadistic bastard after all. Or maybe we're just too stubborn to die," Leora replied, her resolve hardening. "Either way, we're not done yet." Together, they pushed forward, driven by the promise of answers and the determination to survive. It was a race against time and the universe itself, but they were ready to face whatever came next, armed with nothing but their wits and a healthy dose of sarcasm. Because sometimes that was all you had. And sometimes that was enough. The Martian maintenance bay buzzed with activity, the oppressive heat doing its damnedest to melt their resolve. Leora wiped her brow with the back of her hand, wishing for a breeze that would never come. Mars was a planet of many things, breathable air and comfort not among them. "All right, team," she said, her voice cracking like a whip. "Time to think outside the box, seeing as the box is currently on fire." Finn, ever the picture of optimism, snorted. "It's not just on fire. It's been shot into the sun and blown to atoms." "Yeah, well, this is what we get for volunteering for a one-way ticket to hell," Jamal chimed in, dragging a hand through his hair. "But hey, at least we got front-row seats." The console flickered with malicious glee, as if Mars itself was enjoying their plight. Leora couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was somewhere, cackling hysterically. They were at the mercy of anomalies, and it was clear that mercy wasn't included in the Martian handbook. Zara's fingers danced over her portable console, frustration etched in every line of her body. "These anomalies," she muttered, "are like trying to nail jelly to a wall. One minute they are there, the next they are laughing in your face." "Must be some damn funny jelly," Finn quipped, though his eyes remained fixed on the console as if daring it to misbehave. Jamal, ever the voice of reason, leaned back in his chair with a sigh. We need something they can't predict, something that makes them lose their smug sense of superiority. Human stubbornness, Finn suggested. We're pretty good at that. Leora paused, her mind snagging on the idea like a fishhook. Human stubbornness, could it be that simple? The anomalies thrived on routine, on patterns. What if they flipped the script? Finn, she said slowly, testing the waters of her own thoughts. You might be onto something. Really? He blinked, momentarily thrown by the prospect of being useful. I mean, of course I am. What exactly am I onto? Leora's eyes lit up with the kind of manic determination that made you question her sanity, but hell, sanity was overrated on Mars. What if we fought anomalies with us, our own unpredictability, our emotion, our will? Zara leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. Are you suggesting we weaponize human tenacity? Why not? It's the one thing these anomalies haven't accounted for, Leora stated, a spark igniting behind her eyes. If we can create a device that harnesses our collective will, maybe we can screw with the anomalies' heads. Jamal chuckled, shaking his head. Using human nature as a weapon. I like it. Never thought our sheer bloody-mindedness would be an asset. There's a first time for everything, Leora replied, rolling up her sleeves. Let's make the impossible possible. It was a last-ditch plan, the kind you made when you had run out of options, and your best plan involved more hope than logic. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was pulling miracles out of disaster's ass. The team got to work, pooling their limited resources and even more limited patience. Zara furiously coded, her console a blur of numbers and letters as she crafted the skeleton of their new device. Finn and Jamal scavenged parts from the scrap pile like scavengers on a feast day, tossing bits of metal and wire over their shoulders with reckless abandon. Reminds me of building toy robots as a kid, Finn mused, holding up a bent piece of circuitry. Except, with the fate of humanity at stake. Jamal grinned. Nothing like a little pressure to get the creative juices flowing. Leora soldered wires with the focus of a surgeon, her mind lost in the intricate dance of chaos theory and human stubbornness. If they could harness this. If they could focus their collective will into a coherent force. Mars shuddered under their feet, as if it sensed their defiance and didn't like it one bit. Machinery whirred and beeped, lending a chaotic symphony to their endeavor. It was madness, but it was their madness, and they would make it work or die trying. How's it coming? Leora asked, glancing up from her work to see Zara's fingers flying across her console like a woman possessed. Slow and steady, Zara replied, her eyes never leaving the screen. But if this doesn't work, I'm blaming you for getting my hopes up. Finn looked up from the heap of electronic entrails he'd been sifting through. Don't worry, I've got a backup plan. Does it involve running away screaming? Jamal asked wryly. No, Finn grinned, holding up a small circuit board with a flourish. It involves running away screaming while chucking this at the anomalies. Just to mix things up. Leora laughed despite herself, the sound strangely foreign in the tense atmosphere. You always know how to lighten the mood, Finn. That's because I'm the comic relief, Finn replied with a mock bow. And if I go, you'll all have to find someone else to make fun of. Jamal set down his tools, wiping his hands on his coveralls. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. The hours ticked by, the team's determination undeterred by fatigue or the oppressive heat. They worked with a feverish intensity, spurred on by the promise of a solution just within reach. The anomalies continued their cosmic tantrums, but the group's focus remained unbroken. Finally, with a triumphant cry, Zara held up the finished device, a cobbled-together mess of wires and metal that looked more like a child's science project than a sophisticated piece of technology. But it was theirs, crafted from hope and desperation in equal measure. Let's see what this baby can do, Leora said, her voice trembling with anticipation. She positioned the device in the center of the bay, feeling the weight of their collective hopes settle over it like a shroud. As if sensing their intent, the anomalies began to stir, the air crackling with tension. Leora took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. They had one shot at this, and they couldn't afford to miss. "Everyone, focus your thoughts," she instructed, her voice steady. "Imagine the anomalies stabilizing. Picture them bending to our will." The team gathered around the device, their expressions a mixture of determination and disbelief. They closed their eyes, willing the universe to heed their call, to bend to their collective will. The air hummed with energy, the device flickering to life with a series of rhythmic pulses. Leora's heart raced, each beat a drum of anticipation as they waited for the impossible to happen. And then, slowly at first but with growing certainty, the anomalies began to respond. The chaos that had plagued them for so long started to recede, the turbulent energy smoothing into a calm, predictable wave. "It's working," Zara breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I can't believe it, but it's actually working." The team erupted into cheers, their voices echoing through the bay with a mix of relief and triumph. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated victory, a testament to the power of human spirit and unity. "Take that, universe," Finn shouted, pumping his fist in the air. "We showed you what we're made of," Jamal laughed, clapping him on the back. "And here I thought we were just stubborn idiots. Turns out we're stubborn geniuses." Leora allowed herself a rare moment of pride, feeling the warmth of their success wash over her like a wave. They'd done the impossible, and it was a feeling she would treasure for as long as she lived, however long that might be. But the moment was fleeting, the reality of their situation crashing down on her like a bucket of cold water. They'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," she cautioned, though her smile remained. "We've still got a long way to go." Finn grinned, ever the optimist. "Yeah, but at least we're heading in the right direction." As they turned back to their work, the atmosphere in the bay was one of renewed determination and hope. They had faced the impossible and emerged victorious, and that knowledge lent them a strength they hadn't known they possessed. Together, they pushed forward, driven by the promise of a brighter future and the unyielding belief that they could overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. Because if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was defying the odds. And on Mars, that was a skill worth its weight in gold. When you've volunteered for a one-way trip to Mars, you've already proven you're just the right mix of crazy and determined. But it takes a special kind of stupid to decide that the human willpower is the solution to a problem that's been kicking your ass. That's where Dr. Leora Vance and her merry band of misfits found themselves, huddled around a device that looked more like a reject from a scrapyard sculpture contest than anything you'd bet your life on. "All right, kiddos," Leora said, her voice imbued with the kind of false optimism that only comes from someone who's out of their mind. "Time to see if we can bully the universe into submission." Finn was busy adjusting something that probably didn't need adjusting, because that's what you do when you're nervous and don't want to admit it. "Do you think the anomalies are just going to roll over because we asked nicely?" "Well, it's either that or we hope they have a sudden change of heart and decide to play nice," Zara replied, her console flickering as if it were in on the joke. The sarcasm in her voice was thicker than the rust in Martian air. Jamal, ever the practical one, leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. "As much as I'd love to bank on cosmic benevolence, I'm gonna guess it's about as likely as Finn growing a second brain." "Hey," Finn protested, trying to look offended but failing because, let's face it, he knew where he stood on the intellectual food chain. "I'm an important part of this team." "Yeah," Jamal grinned. "Comic relief." "And bait if it comes to that." Leora shook her head, a small smirk playing on her lips. In a place where hope went to die, humor was the strongest weapon they had. "Well, that and a machine built out of pure desperation." "Everyone ready?" she asked, fingers twitching with the need to do something, anything. The kind of energy that gets people killed if they're not careful. They nodded, more out of habit than actual belief that this was going to work. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, It was doing stupid stuff just to see what happened. "All right," Leora continued, taking a breath like a diver about to plunge into the depths. "Remember what we talked about. Focus on the anomalies stabilizing. Picture them falling into line, like a bunch of unruly schoolchildren," Zara said dryly. "Except they're not cute and there's no teacher to send them to detention," Finn snorted. "I dunno, that sounds like Jamal's job." Jamal rolled his eyes but didn't argue. He knew better than to try and outsnark Finn. It was like trying to outdrink a fish. Leora activated the device, a low hum filling the air as it powered up. It was the sound of 1,000 prayers and curses rolled into one, a symphony of chaos that could either save them or end them. "Okay, everyone, eyes closed," Leora instructed, her voice a mix of steel and silk. "Think of something that makes you feel strong, angry, determined. Hell, think of your ex if that's what it takes." "That's easy," Finn muttered, closing his eyes. "She owes me 50 credits. The room fell silent, save for the persistent buzz of the machine. The air felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see if they would succeed or be swallowed by their own hubris. Leora focused on the anomalies, picturing them bending under the weight of their collective will. She imagined them like dancers, twisting and turning to a new rhythm. A rhythm dictated not by unpredictable fields, but by humans who refused to be beaten by a damn rock. Jamal's thoughts wandered to Earth, to the life he'd left behind. The polluted skies and crumbling infrastructures. The chaos and instability. He didn't miss it, but he remembered what it was like to be a part of something bigger. A planet struggling to survive, and here they were doing the same damn thing on Mars. "Come on," he whispered, "because sometimes you just have to talk to the universe like it's a stubborn mule. Work with us just this once." Zara, her fingers twitching as if still racing across her console, imagined the anomalies as lines of code that needed rewriting. She'd done it 1,000,000 times, taking something broken and fixing it. It was what she did best, even if the universe hadn't gotten the memo. Finn, for all his jokes, genuinely believed they could pull this off. He had to, because if he didn't, what was the point? He imagined the anomalies as annoying little siblings, eventually giving in because you'd worn them down with sheer persistence. The device pulsed, the light from it casting strange shadows on the walls. The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. And then, slowly, the air began to shift. Leora felt it first, a softening of the chaos that had surrounded them for so long. The anomalies, those unpredictable bastards, were starting to stabilize. It was like watching a storm calm, the eye passing overhead with deceptive tranquility. "It's working," she whispered, afraid to break the spell. "Holy shit, it's actually working." Eyes blinked open, disbelief etched into every face. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd managed to turn the tide. "Well, I'll be damned," Jamal said, shaking his head. "We might actually survive this after all." Zara's grin was wide, eyes alight with victory. "And they said human stubbornness couldn't solve everything." Finn laughed, a sound of pure relief. "Take that, anomalies. We just out-humaned you." The machine continued to pulse, the anomalies now a controlled dance of energy, kept in line by the sheer force of human will. It was a fragile piece, but it was theirs. Leora sank into a chair, adrenaline crashing now that the immediate danger had passed. "I can't believe that worked," she admitted, rubbing her face with both hands. "Never underestimate the power of a desperate human," Jamal replied, leaning against the wall with a satisfied smile. "Especially when they've got nothing left to lose." The atmosphere in the room shifted, the tension replaced by a cautious optimism. They'd won a significant battle, but they knew Mars wasn't done with them yet. It never would be. "That's the kind of relationship you have with a planet that seems hell-bent on killing you." "What do we do now?" Finn asked, because someone always has to ask that question. It's like a rule or something. Leora looked around at her team, the misfits she'd trusted with everything. Maybe they didn't have all the answers, but they had the one thing that mattered: each other. "We keep going," she said, more determined than ever. "We've got a colony to save and a planet to tame, And I don't know about you, but I'm not about to let Mars get the last laugh. Right, Zara agreed, her fingers already itching to get back to work. Besides, I haven't finished rewriting the universe yet, and I need something new to complain about, Finn added with a wink. Jamal chuckled, shaking his head. You're all insane, you know that. Yeah, but we're all insane together, Leora replied, her smile a reflection of the stubborn hope they all shared. And that's good enough for me. With renewed purpose, the team set back to work, ready to face whatever else Mars had in store. They knew it wouldn't be easy. It never was. But they'd face the impossible and come out the other side. That had to count for something. They weren't just a team, they were a force of nature. And if Mars thought it could break them, it had another thing coming. After all, in the grand cosmic scheme of things, humans were the real anomalies. Stubborn, unpredictable, and any planet's worst nightmare. What do you think the folks back on Earth would say if they knew? Finn asked as he tinkered with the now stable device, the question hanging in the air like smoke. Probably something about us being crazy fools, Zara said, rolling her eyes. But that's nothing new, Jamal snorted. They'd probably want to know how many more ways we could screw this up before getting it right. And then they'd send us a participation trophy, Leora added with a smirk. For being the first idiots to make Mars blink. Participation trophy. Hell, we deserve a medal, Finn argued, mock indignation in his tone. Do you know how many sleepless nights I've spent worrying about getting disintegrated by a rogue anomaly? More than you'd ever admit, Jamal said, clapping Finn on the back. But look at it this way. At least you'll have one hell of a story to tell. If we ever make it back to Earth, Finn replied with a wry smile. Though I doubt they'd believe half of what we've been through. Doesn't matter if they do, Leora said, her gaze distant. What matters is that we proved it to ourselves. We took on the worst Mars could throw at us and came out swinging. The universe is probably pissed, Zara said, unable to hide her satisfaction. All those carefully laid plans undone by a bunch of stubborn humans. Good, Jamal said, his voice firm. Let it be pissed. We're here and we're not going anywhere. Leora stood, a sense of purpose renewing her exhausted limbs. All right, enough standing around. We've got anomalies to monitor and a colony to save. As the team fell back into their routine, the maintenance bay felt different. Lighter, somehow. Maybe it was the knowledge that they'd taken a significant step forward, or maybe it was just the thrill of defying the odds. Whatever it was, they weren't about to question it. Not when there was still so much to do, so much to fight for. They were more than just a ragtag group of engineers and scientists. They were pioneers, fighting not just for survival but for a future on a planet that seemed determined to thwart them at every turn. But they were stubborn, persistent, and just crazy enough to believe they could win. And on Mars, that was a winning combination. The team worked together seamlessly, each playing to their strengths. Zara and Finn focused on refining the device, ensuring it would continue to hold the anomalies at bay. Jamal kept an eye on the life support systems, ready to jump in at the first sign of trouble. And Leora. She kept everyone moving forward, determined not to let the brief taste of victory lull them into complacency. She knew better than anyone that Mars was just biding its time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, they had a colony to save and a planet to conquer, one anomaly at a time. Hey, Leora, Finn called over as he tightened a bolt. Think we could convince the anomalies to work as our PR team? I bet they'd ace a press release. Leora laughed, shaking her head. I think we'd have better luck convincing Mars to sprout some palm trees. Maybe next year, Jamal deadpanned. After we teach the rocks to juggle. With humor and determination as their guiding stars, the team pressed on, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They might not have all the answers, but they had each other. And that was more than enough. Because in the end, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about proving that even in the harshest of environments, humanity could thrive. It was about defying the odds and rewriting the rules, one stubborn act at a time. It was about being human in all its messy, complicated, and wonderfully unpredictable glory. And if the universe didn't like it, well, That was just too damn bad. The maintenance bay was filled with the kind of clattering that suggested a machine was either coming to life or falling apart. On Mars, it was often hard to tell. Leora stood at the center of this cacophony, arms crossed, surveying the scene with an expression that could either be mistaken for constipation or deep concentration. Her team buzzed around her like a group of caffeinated bees, each intent on their own tasks. "All right, folks," she announced. "Let's see if we can keep this damn colony from becoming a permanent part of the Martian landscape." Finn, perpetually anxious but considerably less jittery after their recent success, gave a thumbs up while fiddling unnecessarily with a bolt that had been securely fastened hours ago. Because who doesn't want to be buried under a planet that's basically a giant rust bucket? Speak for yourself, Jamal muttered from his position near the life support systems. "I'd rather not be a Martian fossil." Zara, ever the queen of sarcasm, glanced up from her console with a ghost of a smile. "Relax, Jamal. With our luck, we'll be rescued just before our bodies turn into interesting rock formations." The console flickered like it was doing its best impression of a strobe light at a really terrible nightclub. Zara sighed, slapping it with an air of casual violence that suggested this was just another day at the office. As if on cue, the flickering stopped. "See, aggressive indifference wins again." Jamal shook his head. "I'll never understand how that works." "It doesn't," Zara replied, her tone as dry as the Martian surface. "But don't tell the machines that." Leora couldn't help but chuckle, despite the reality of their situation. They weren't out of the woods yet, not that Mars had any woods to speak of. But for the first time since they'd landed, it felt like they were more than just one step ahead of catastrophe. Maybe two if they were lucky and the universe was feeling particularly generous. But Leora knew better than to rely on luck. Luck, in her experience, was about as reliable as a Martian weather forecast. No, what she relied on was her team, this ragtag bunch of misfits who somehow managed to make Mars feel a little less like a death sentence and more like a particularly challenging puzzle. Finn, ever the warrior, was running through a mental checklist. "So, we've got the anomalies under control, life support stable, and the machinery isn't trying to eat us. What's the next disaster on the agenda?" "Finding a way to make Mars stop trying to kill us would be a nice start," Leora replied, rubbing her eyes. "But I'll settle for making sure the colony doesn't implode in the next 24 hours. "That's the spirit," Jamal said with a grin, his hands moving deftly over the controls. "Aim for survival, settle for mediocrity." "Hey, mediocrity's underrated," Zara chimed in. "Besides, it's better than being a pile of space dust." "We're just a bunch of galactic overachievers," Finn quipped, finally stepping away from his bolting obsession. In a low expectations kind of way. But for all their jokes, there was an undercurrent of determination that couldn't be ignored. They'd managed the impossible, stabilized the anomalies, and given the colony a fighting chance. And now, as Leora looked at the faces of her team, she saw something she hadn't dared to hope for, the glimmer of possibility. "Okay, back to work," Leora instructed, her voice filled with a steely resolve. "We've got a colony to keep running and a planet to not get crushed by." As they dispersed, each returning to their tasks with renewed vigor, the maintenance bay seemed to take on a new life. It was still a mess, still filled with the ever-present hum of machinery and the occasional burst of static. But there was a sense of purpose now, a feeling that they weren't just running in circles anymore. Zara, having temporarily beaten the console into submission, glanced at Leora. "So, what's the plan for when we make Mars boring and predictable?" "Retirement," Leora replied without missing a beat. "Preferably somewhere with a beach and breathable air." "Dream big," Zara said, her sarcastic tone belying the genuine warmth in her eyes. "But we'll get there, one way or another." The day wore on, each hour marked by the rhythmic clanking of tools and the occasional curse word. But as the anomalies stabilized and the colony systems held steady, they began to see the outlines of a future that hadn't seemed possible just days before. "You know," Jamal started, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. "We might just pull this off." "Don't jinx it," Finn warned, eyes wide with mock horror. "I'm not ready to tempt fate. Not after everything we've been through." "Fate's already got enough on its plate," Zara pointed out, a smirk on her lips. "Besides, it's not like we're gonna die twice." "Comforting," Jamal said, rolling his eyes. "But point taken." Leora watched them, a sense of pride welling up inside her. They'd come to Mars as strangers, bonded by nothing more than a shared mission and a collective stubbornness that bordered on foolishness. But now they were something more. A team, a family, a force of nature determined not to let a little thing like an inhospitable planet get the best of them. "All right, gang," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. "Let's wrap it up for today. We've got another long one ahead of us tomorrow." As they packed up their tools and prepared to call it a night, the maintenance bay was filled with the sounds of hope, laughter, conversation, the gentle hum of machines that for once weren't trying to kill them. And as Leora switched off the last of the lights, she allowed herself a rare moment of optimism. They'd faced down the worst Mars had to offer and come out swinging. They still had battles to fight, challenges to overcome, but for the first time it felt like they were winning. The walk back to their quarters was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. But there was a lightness in the air, a sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. As they reached their living area, Jamal stretched, a yawn escaping him. "I'm gonna sleep like the dead tonight. Assuming the anomalies don't decide to have another tantrum," Finn added, though his voice was more teasing than fearful. "Enough with the doom and gloom," Zara said, shoving him playfully. "We've earned a good night's rest." Leora watched them, a smile tugging at her lips. "Get some sleep, everyone. We've got a colony to keep alive tomorrow." With final good nights exchanged, they each retreated to their rooms, the exhaustion of the day giving way to the promise of rest. Leora lingered a moment longer, her thoughts drifting to the future. They'd come so far, accomplished so much, but there was still work to be done. And as she lay down, fatigue pulling her into a deep sleep, she knew with certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Morning arrived with the harsh, artificial lighting that was their constant companion on Mars. Leora was up before the rest, her mind already ticking through the tasks of the day. She found herself in the makeshift kitchen area, contemplating the rather bleak selection of breakfast options. "Hey, chef," Jamal greeted, joining her with a yawn. "What's on the menu today?" "Powdered eggs and disappointment," she replied, gesturing to the collection of ration packs. "Unless you've got a secret stash of bacon somewhere." "Not unless the anomalies have started producing it," he said, reaching for a coffee substitute that promised a caffeine-like experience. As the others trickled in, the room filled with the usual banter and camaraderie. It was a routine they'd established, a way to ground themselves before facing the chaos of the day. Finn, blinking sleep from his eyes, joined them at the table. "So what's on the agenda?" "More anomaly wrangling, pretty much," Leora confirmed. "We need to make sure the systems hold and we're not suddenly sucked into a time warp." "Because that would be inconvenient," Zara added, stirring her drink with a plastic spoon. "I already have plans for next week. As long as those plans involve not dying, we're on the same page," Jamal said, his tone light despite the underlying truth. Breakfast passed in a blur of conversation and caffeine, the team gradually transitioning from groggy to alert. And as they prepared to tackle another day on the Red Planet, the weight of what they'd accomplished hung in the air, a reminder of their resilience, their sheer stubbornness, and their refusal to give up. Stepping back into the maintenance bay, Leora felt a surge of determination. They'd come too far to let Mars get the last laugh. They'd faced the impossible and emerged stronger for it. Now it was time to turn that hard-won experience into something more, a future worth living for. "We've got this," she said, her voice carrying the weight of conviction. "We've come too far to quit now." The team nodded, a silent pact forming between them. They'd overcome so much together, and whatever Mars threw their way next, they'd meet it head-on. And so they worked day after day, a living testament to human tenacity. Through setbacks and victories, through laughter and frustration, they pushed forward, each step bringing them closer to the future they fought so hard to build. Mars was still a harsh, unforgiving place, but it was theirs, and as long as they drew breath, they'd keep fighting to make it home. Because that's what humans do. They adapt, they survive, and they find a way to thrive, even in the most inhospitable of places. Leora knew they hadn't just stabilized the anomalies. They'd stabilized themselves, their bond as unbreakable as the planet they now called home. And as the days turned into weeks, that bond would prove to be their greatest strength. In the end, it wasn't the technology or the machines that made the difference. It was them, their grit, their humor, their unwavering resolve. They were the real anomalies on Mars, the stubborn humans who refused to be beaten by a damn rock. And in that, they found their victory.